So then in the school, blessed by extraordinary teachers, I got heavy doses of the great moderns, as Joyce, James Joyce, again in a fresh and non-argumentative way. This was news for the teachers in active sense, and this therefore became news for the people whom they were teaching. So it began to make it clear that a language is not simply a generality that all possess, but a very specific information of all the particular ways in which people have lived in particular places, with all the resonance and all the reference that those places and habits therein had accumulated. It's like a wild living museum, as well as a projection of all that people had come to say, and all the ways in which they had said it. In this country, forever, because we are fact of such a diverse and insistent immigration of peoples from such a diversity of cultural determinations, the language is fantastically rich and various, actually. And therefore, I mean, our poetries are not simply one mainstream term, but are, they're plural. There are many, many poetries in this country that all come, in fact, from the habits and language patterns of the people who are their base, or their constituency. I didn't really read Whitman until I was about 30. And in that time, Whitman was not felt to be a remarkably or even a necessary American writer. He was thought as the kind of chauvinistic or egocentric and blousy, etc., poet of the 19th century, almost like Booster America poet. And in fact, there was some kind of tacit, not shame exactly, but embarrassment that this poet had been seemingly so gung-ho for the imagination of America. But I can tell you what when I finally did read him and recognized the stupidity, my own very much included, that had kept me from respecting him or thinking of him as he is the great poet of our company forever. I felt really like a consummate asshole to have been so dumb. This is a section from Crossing Brooklyn Ferry, which he used to do a lot, and it speaks for itself. He's thinking of all the people who will come to that same place and will be in that same situation of that crossing that river, the Hudson. These and all else were to me the same as they are to you. I project myself a moment to tell you, also I return. I loved well those cities. I loved well the stately and rapid river. The men and women I saw were all near to me. Others the same, others who look back on me because I looked forward to them. The time will come, though I stop here today and tonight. What is it then between us? What is the count of the scores of hundreds of years between us? Whatever it is, it avails not. Distance avails not, and place avails not. I too lived. Brooklyn of ample hills was mine. I too walked the streets of Manhattan Island and bathed in the waters around it. I too felt the curious, abrupt questionings stir within me. In the day, among crowds of people, sometimes they came upon me. In my walks home late at night, or as I lay in my bed, they came upon me. I too had been struck from the float forever held in solution. I too had received identity by my body. That I knew was of my body, and what I should be, I knew I should be of my body. It is not upon you alone the dark patches fall. The dark threw patches down on me also. The best I had done seemed to me blank and suspicious. My great thoughts, as I supposed them, were they not in reality meager? Would not people laugh at me? It is not you alone who know what it is to be evil. I am he who knew what it was to be evil. I too knitted the old knot of contrariety, blabbed, blushed, resented, lied, stole, grudged, had guile, anger, lust, hot wishes I dared not speak, was wayward, vain, greedy, shallow, sly, cowardly, malignant, the wolf, the snake, the hog not wanting in me, the cheating look, the frivolous word, the adulterous wish not wanting, refusals, hates, postponements, meanness, laziness, none of these wanting. But I was Manhattanese, friendly and proud. I was called by my nighest name by clear, loud voices of young men as they saw me approaching or passing, felt their arms on my neck as I stood, or the negligent leaning of their flesh against me as I sat. Saw many I loved in the street or ferry boat or public assembly, yet never told them a word, lived the same life with the rest, the same old laughing, gnawing, sleeping, played the part that still looks back on the actor or actress, the same old role, the role that is what we make it, as great as we like or as small as we like, or both great and small. Closer yet I approach you. What thought you have of me, I had as much of you. I laid in my stores in advance. I considered long and seriously of you before you were born. Who was to know what should come home to me? Who knows but I am enjoying this? Who knows but I am as good as looking at you now, for all you cannot see me? That's an incredible voice. You know, even the shift, possibly you might say, nigh or whatever words you might find no longer are habits of our own speech. But the tone, the way he's getting there and saying something is just, I think, magnificent. And it's not something you can simply learn, but that kind of voice was so specific, to this country's ways of speaking. In Whitman's voice, that's so dear, so tender, so clear, and that at one point in his poem he says, "Who touches this book touches a man, a physical being," and you sure feel it. There's a beautiful later poem of Hart Crane's which said, "My hand in yours, Walt Whitman, so." I mean, you feel he's as tangible as a friend dear indeed. When I was in school, and we were reading away all the classic English lit, one of the poets that really got to me was one of the classic romantics, as they were called. Samuel Taylor Coleridge certainly had an extraordinary emphasis. Even almost, I was fascinated, for example, the Rime of the Ancient Mariner, which has a base of a so-called quatrain, but now, and I always thought it was absolutely in quatrains, but as I'm looking just now at it, and I'm finding endless verses that are 6 lines, in other words, where he gets going and simply continues, e.g., here's the classic quatrain, "They groaned, they stirred, they all uprose." No, this is the bodies of the ship's crew are inspirited, and the ship moves on. "They groaned, they stirred, they all uprose, nor spake, nor moved their eyes. It had been strange, even in a dream, to have seen those dead men rise." You can also hear in the rhythms how this isn't simply da-dum, 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 da-dum. It's very different. It had been strange, even in a dream, to have seen those dead men rise. The helmsman steered, the ship moved on, yet never a breeze up blew. The mariners all 'gan work the ropes where they were wont to do. They raised their limbs like lifeless tools. We were a ghastly crew. Now that's 6 lines. Then one is actually 7. But you hear, in other words, here, even as simple a limit as "what there shall be" as a verse, 4 lines, is moving to keep pace or to keep rapport, to keep hold of the emotional ground that's making the poem move at all. So if and as there's a moment that expands in attention and in authority, Coleridge lets the verse expand to manage. Here's this poem really got to me, possibly growing up in New England in this sort of farm scene. This is one called Frost at Midnight. And this says, his son Hartley, born a year and a half before the poem was written. The frost performs its secret ministry, unhelped by any wind. The owlet's cry came loud, and hark again, loud as before. The inmates of my cottage, all at rest, have left me to that solitude which suits abstruser musings, save that at my side my cradled infant slumbers peacefully. 'Tis calm indeed, so calm that it disturbs and vexes meditation with its strange and extreme silentness. Sea, hill, and wood, this populous village, sea and hill and wood, with all the numberless goings-on of life, inaudible as dreams. The thin blue flame lies on my low-burnt fire and quivers not. Only that film which fluttered on the grate still flutters there, the sole unquiet thing. Methinks its motion in this hush of nature gives it dim sympathies with me who live, making it a companionable form, whose puny flaps and freaks the idling spirit, by its own moods, interprets everywhere, echo or mirror seeking of itself, and makes a toy of thought. But oh, how oft at school, with most believing mind, presageful, have I gazed upon the bars to watch that fluttering stranger, and as oft with unclosed lids already had I dreamt of my sweet birthplace in the old church tower, whose bells, the poor man's only music, rang from morn to evening, all the hot, fair day, so sweetly that they stirred and haunted me with a wild pleasure falling on mine ear, most like articulate sounds of things to come. So gazed I till the soothing things I dreamt lulled me to sleep, and sleep prolonged my dreams. And so I brooded all the following morn, awed by the stern preceptor's face, mine eye filled with mock study on my swimming book, save if the door half opened and I snatched a hasty glance, and still my heart leapt up, for still I hoped to see the stranger's face, townsman or aunt or sister more beloved, my playmate when we both were clothed alike. Dear babe, that sleepest cradled by my side, whose gentle breathings, heard in this deep calm, fill up the interspersed vacancies and momentary pauses of the thought. My babe so beautiful, it thrills my heart with tender gladness thus to look at thee, and think that thou shalt learn far other lore and in far other scenes. For I was reared in the great city, pent mid cloisters dim, and saw not lovely but the sky and stars. But thou, my babe, shall wander like a breeze by lakes and sandy shores, beneath the crags of ancient mountain and beneath the clouds, which image in their bulk both lakes and shores and mountain crags. So shalt thou see and hear the lovely shapes and sounds intelligible of that eternal language which thy God utters, who from eternity doth teach himself in all, and all things in himself. Great universal teacher, he shall mold thy spirit, and by giving make it ask. Therefore all seasons shall be sweet to thee, whether the summer clothe the general earth with greenness, or the redbreast sit and sing betwixt the tufts of snow on the bare branch of mossy apple tree, while the nigh thatch smokes in the sun thaw, whether the eve drops fall, heard only in the trances of the blast, or if the secret ministry of frost shall hang them up in silent icicles, quietly shining to the quiet moon. I guess it has a mode of speaking thee and thou, kinds of English that would not again be common to needs I had. Nonetheless, it was an emotion that was very interesting to me. And one thing I always used poetry for was a was a way to get to what other people, men and women, had seemingly felt about the world they were persons of. I mean, I wanted the social information, but much more valuable to me was how they felt. I mean, how they felt about those they loved, how they felt about themselves. That's why Whitman, again, was so crucial. And I was fascinated by what ways they thought the world significantly to be and how they thought people were significantly in it. I could read, there's no time really to do it all, but Emily Dickinson was extremely valuable in that way. Hart Crane was extremely valuable. Older poets going back in time, Donne, John Donne, et cetera, et cetera. But I couldn't, you see, coming from West Acton, Massachusetts, there was no possibility of me, quote, writing like them. I had intently to get a way of saying things that was particular to my own habits of speech. I wanted to read a very short sort of excerpt from William Carlos Williams, this terrific poet, like New Jersey doctor. And here, he's talking to his wife. He's now had several really crucial strokes. I mean, almost dead. And he's trying, it begins, it's so long I can't read the whole thing or even much of it, but it says, there was something urgent I have to say to you, and you alone, but it must wait while I drink in the joy of your approach, perhaps for the last time. And so, with fear in my heart, I drag it out and keep on talking, for I dare not stop. Listen while I talk on against time. It will not be for long. Then at the end of this, he was talking about love. I risked what I had to do, therefore to prove that we love each other, while my very bones sweated that I could not cry to you in the act of asphodel. I mean, you know, it sounds ridiculous. No, it doesn't sound ridiculous. Here's a man in his age, old man, and he's saying to his wife of all those years that it was that curious isolation that even when we were physically making love, I wanted to cry to you. I wanted to, and yet in that curious, close as humans can presumably be, there was still a failure of ability to call out, to say what was thus moving. I risked what I had to do, therefore to prove that we love each other, while my very bones sweated that I could not cry to you in the act of asphodel, that greeny flower. I come, my sweet, to sing to you. My heart rouses, thinking to bring you news of something that concerns you and concerns many men. Look at what passes for the new. You will not find it there, but in despised poems. It is difficult to get the news from poems, yet men die miserably every day for lack of what is found there. Hear me out, for I too am concerned, and every man who wants to die at peace in his bed besides. Okay, finally, got to stop leaning on the great poets and get to something specific to myself. A few years ago, February 29th to May 3rd, 1976, I was traveling incredibly in the physical world. I did this so-called tour that took me to 9 countries in something like a little over 2 months. And of that time, I spent 1 month in New Zealand. And at this point, I was in Singapore. I'll just read a little bit. This was the 11th of March, 11th of April, I see, evening. Walking street back here, the main drag for the money, and lights just going on. Day faded, people hot, distracted. One person walking, feeling older now, heavier from chest to hips. A lump won't move with my legs, and all of it tireder, slower. Flashes in store windows, person with somewhat silly hat on, heavy-waisted, big in the company, and out of step, out of place. back to the lone hotel room, sit here now, writing this, thinking of the next step and when and how to take it. I met this really very dear, not just pleasant, but very moving, pleasant doctor, also a writer in Singapore. And he'd taken me back to his house, and we just talking. Faded back last night into older dreams, some boyhood lost innocences. The streets have become inaccessible, and when I think of people, I am somehow not one of them. Talking to the doctor, novelist, he read me a poem of a man's horror in Vietnam, child and wife lost to him. His own son sat across from me, about 8, thin, intent, and myself was like a huge fading balloon that could hear but not be heard, though we talked and became clear friends. I wanted to tell him I was an honest, caring man. I wanted the world to be more simple for all of us. His wife said, driving back, that my hotel's bar was a swinging place in the 50s. It was a dark, fading night. She spoke quickly, obliquely, along for the ride, sitting in the front seat beside him. I could have disappeared, gone away, seen them fading too, war and peace, death, life, still no one. In these days, marijuana was really a narcotic or drug that was almost entirely fact of black community, musicians particularly. But anyhow, this is the image. It literally is a wicker basket. I was thinking of the kind of, almost not really a picnic basket or a laundry basket. I was almost thinking of the wicker basket such as would be suspended under a balloon. But there's also, I don't know, a wicker basket. Comes the time when it's later, and onto your table the head waiter puts the bill, and very soon after rings out the sound of lively laughter. Picking up change, hands like a walrus, and a face like a barn doors, and a head without any apparent size, nothing but 2 eyes. So that's you, man, or me. I make it as I can. I pick up, I go, faster than they know. Out the door, the street like a night, any night, and no one in sight. But then, well, there she is, old friend Liz, and she opens the door of her Cadillac. I step in back, and we're gone. She turns me on. There are very huge stars, man, in the sky, and from somewhere very far off, someone hands me a slice of apple pie with a gob of white ice cream on top of it, and I eat it slowly. And while certainly they are laughing at me, and all around me is racket of these cats not making it, I make it in my wicker basket. I don't know that that's an entirely, I don't think that would make everyone rush out to get high, actually. If you want a kind of a complex paranoia with distinct increase in sensory apprehension, then you might consider it, but don't ever forget its social and legal implications. But that's certainly a pretty accurate sense of it. For me, that was 1956, first published. As a young person, like they say, in trying to find out what the world was and where it was, think of the great poets, Pope, Alexander Pope, with that very set classic, those rhymed couplets, and the very steady on beat, the rhythm, or equally John Dryden. Both of them, geniuses of their art. But there was another sense that the form of a poem, or what one had to say, came with its own authority. That is much like, say, in jazz, where you've got the set possibility of the harmonics or the pattern of the melody, let's say. But within that fact, you've got many ways in which you can respond and or accentuate and or determine both the melodic line and or a harmony pertaining. I was thinking about Thelonious Monk as being one of the incredible people of that, or Charlie Parker. These are musicians who were, and composers who were absolutely crucial to my imagination in the middle 40s. I mean, they were extraordinary. I think I applied to them in some ways more intensively than I did to the classic fact of poetry. They taught me more about serial order and rhythm and ways in which you might use it than possibly the so-called models in poetry. The act of love. Whatever constitutes the act of love, save physical encounter, you are dear to me, not value as with banks, but a meaning, self-sufficient, dry at times as sand, or else the trees dripping with rain. How shall one, this so-called person, say it? He loves, his mind is occupied, his hands move, writing words which come into his head. Now here, the day surrounds this man and woman, sitting a small distance apart. Love will not solve it, but draws closer, always makes the moisture of their mouths and bodies actively engage. If I wanted a dirty picture, would it always be of a woman straddled? Yes and no. These are true opposites, a you and me of nonsense for our love. Now, one says, the wind lifts, the sky is very blue, the water just beyond me makes its lovely sounds. How dear you are to me, how lovely all your body is, how all these senses do commingle, so that in your very arms I still can think of you. Then I have there's a lovely poem just across the page, I cannot go away from it. This is, take you back to my terrific youth, a time when everybody in the world was 28 years old. Our world, let's see, was 20, actually we were 29 at this point. But again, this is, no, actually we're 29. This is Allen Ginsberg. A supermarket in California. What thoughts I have of you tonight, Walt Whitman, for I walk down the side streets under the trees with a headache, self-conscious, looking at the full moon. In my hungry fatigue and shopping for images, I went into the neon fruit supermarket, dreaming of your enumerations. What peaches and what penumbras, whole families shopping at night, aisles full of husbands, wives in the avocados, babies in the tomatoes. And you, Garcia Lorca, what were you doing down by the watermelons? I saw you, Walt Whitman, childless, lonely old grubber, poking among the meats in the refrigerator and eyeing the grocery boys. I heard you asking questions of each, Who killed the pork chops? What price bananas? Are you my angel? I wandered in and out of the brilliant stacks of cans following you, and followed in my imagination by the store detective. We strode down the open corridors together in our solitary fancy, tasting artichokes, possessing every frozen delicacy, and never passing the cashier. Where are we going, Walt Whitman? The doors close in an hour. Which way does your beard point tonight? I touch your book and dream of our odyssey in the supermarket and feel absurd. Will we walk all night through solitary streets? The trees add shade to shade, lights out in the houses. We'll both be lonely. Will we stroll dreaming of the lost America of love, past blue automobiles and driveways, home to our silent cottage? Ah, dear father, graybeard, lonely old courage teacher, what America did you have when Charon quit poling his ferry and you got out on a smoking bank and stood watching the boat disappear on the black waters of Lethe? So you see, it was a warm and extraordinary time, and that sense of everybody must be 28. It was paradoxically, it was not a time of great hope. Talking earlier of Stan Brakhage, and if you see the early films of Stan Brakhage, you get a kind of quick sense of how really bleak that time was. It was not, I mean, people at times are nostalgic for the 50s. It's also the time of the Korean War, the time of the McCarthy hearings, the time of the Rosenbergs being executed. It was a time of the classic titles of times of that time were The Lonely Crowd by David Reisman. It was a time of seeming relative economic stability, Eisenhower, but it was also a time of extraordinary feeling of not repression, as though someone were doing it to you, but as though the whole social body were curiously muted, couldn't find words to speak its own feeling. And that's what makes so immensely significant, literally, how the impact of Howell on that time and place is hard now to imagine. It's and you recall the poem, the book, the small book, has its mottos from Whitman. You know, what does it say? Unlock something. I can't quote it exactly. I don't want to muck it up. Unlock the door. Take the doors off that jam. Just open up, because it seemed as though that would never quite happen. But it certainly did for a time open extraordinarily. This is Pound had a lifelong, from the time he discovered him, he had a lifelong respect for Confucius, as our English puts him, or Kung. He felt that he was the most distinct and useful proposer of system, of ways in which humanly we can make collectives and respect the situation, not only of our humanness and of the collective needs of a people. So in this poem is Canto 13. It also has his characteristic measure, his rhythmic bass. Kung walked by the dynastic temple and into the cedar grove, and then out by the lower river, and with him Q, Chi, and Tian, the low-speaking. And, "We are unknown," said Kung. "You will take up charioteering, then you will become known. Or perhaps I should take up charioteering or archery, or the practice of public speaking." And Su Lu said, "I would put the defenses in order." And Q said, "If I were lord of a province, I would put it in better order than this is." And Chi said, "I would prefer a small mountain temple with order in the observances, with a suitable performance of the ritual." And Tian said, with his hand on the strings of his lute, the low sounds continuing after his hand left the strings, and the sound went up like smoke under the leaves, and he looked after the sound. The old swimming hole, and the boys flopping off the planks, or sitting in the underbrush playing mandolins. And Kung smiled upon all of them equally, and Sing Si desired to know which had answered correctly, And Kung said, "They have all answered correctly, that is to say, each in his nature." And Kung raised his cane against Wan Yang being his elder. And Wan Yang sat by the roadside pretending to be receiving wisdom. And Kung said, "You old fool, come out of it. Get up and do something useful." And Kung said, "Respect a child's faculties from the moment it inhales the clear air, but a man of 50 who knows nothing is worthy of no respect. And when the prince has gathered about him all the savants and artists, his riches will be fully employed." And Kung said and wrote on the bow leaves, "If a man have not order within him, he cannot spread order about him. And if a man have not order within him, his family will not act with due order. And if the prince have not order within him, he cannot put order in his dominions." And Kung gave the words order and brotherly deference, and said nothing of the life after death. And he said, "Anyone can run to excess. It is easy to shoot past the mark. It is hard to stand firm in the middle." And they said, if a man commit murder, should his father protect him and hide him? And Kung said, he should hide him. And Kung gave his daughter to Kong Chang, although Kong Chang was in prison. And he gave his niece to Nan Yung, although Nan Yung was out of office. And Kung said, Wang ruled with moderation. In his day the state was well kept. And even I can remember a day when the historians left blanks in their writings. I mean for things they didn't know. But that time seems to be passing. And Kung said, without character you will be unable to play on that instrument or to execute the music fit for the odes. The blossoms of the apricot blow from the east to the west, and I have tried to keep them from falling. It was in some ways a paradigm for Pound's own proposals or his own determinations that he might bring order. The proposal of the cantos was extraordinary insofar as it was a literal attempt to sort through all the range of human conduct and effect and to make a kind of Dante-esque, although that was not literally his model, but it was certainly parallel, and he certainly well knew it, to try to make a proposal of what kinds of human conduct are destructive and what kinds of human conduct are pinnacles of coherence and respect for the fragility and equally the endurance of humanness itself. I'll read one last poem from this, and I like this one a lot. This is Cebu, the Philippines. Cebu. Magellan was X'd here, but not much now left, seemingly, of that event, but for hotel's name, in fact of boats filling the channel. And the churches, of course, as Mexico, as all of Central and South America. Driving in from the airport, hot, trying to get bearings, witness easy-seeming pace of the place, banana trees, mangoes, the high vine grapes on their trellises, but particularly the people moseying along, also the detention home for boys and another casual prison beside the old airport now used for light planes. I saw in a recent paper a picture of a triangular high-rise in Chicago, downtown, a new prison there, looking like a modern hotel. Also in Singapore, there are many, many new buildings, crash housing for the poor that hurtles them skyward off the only physical thing they had left. Wild to see clotheslines, flapping shirts, pants, dresses, something like 30 stories up. I'd choose, no doubt dumbly, to keep my feet on the ground. And I like these houses here, open-sided, thatched roofed, that could all be gone in a flash, or molder more slowly back into humus. One doesn't finally want it all forever, not stop there in abstract time. Whatever, it's got to be yielded, let go of. It can't live any longer than it has to. Being human, at times I get scared of dying, growing old, and think my body's possibly the exception to all that I know has to happen. It isn't, and some of those bananas are already rotten, and no doubt there are vacant, falling down houses and boats with holes in their bottoms no one any longer cares about. That's all right, and I can dig it, yield to it, let what world I do have be the world. In this room, the air conditioner echoes the southwest of America, my mother-in-law's in Albuquerque, and I wonder what she's doing today, and if she's happy there, as I am here with these green walls and the lights on, and finally loving everything I know. This was a fascinating time in my life. It was an absolute tatters, ruins. Always an interesting time. It's like when everything is, everything is gone, absolutely and irrevocably wrong. It's not simply a time to leave town, but it's a time when a move would seem required of some real order. So anyhow, so there for Penelope. Da 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 da. Where is the song? What's wrong with life ever? More or less, days, nights, these days. What's gone is gone forever. Every time, old friend's voice here. I want to stay somehow, if I could, if I would, where else to go? The sea here's out the window, old switcher's house, vertical, railroad blues, lonesome whistle, etc. Can you think of Yee's Cafe in Needles, California, opposite the train station? Can you keep it ever together, old buddy, talking to yourself again? Meantime, some yuck in Hamilton has blown the whistle on a charming evening I wanted to remember otherwise. The river there, that afternoon, sitting, friends, wine and chicken, watching the world go by. Happiness, happiness, so simple. What's that anger? Is that competition sad, when this at least is free, to put it mildly? My Aunt Bernice in Nokomis, Florida's last act, a poem for George Washington's birthday. Do you want to say it's bad? In America, old sport, we shoot first, talk later, or just take you out to dinner. No worries, or not at the moment, sitting here eating bread, cheese, butter, white wine, like Bolinas, Whaletown, my home, like they say, in America. It's one world, it can't be another. So the beauty beside me rises, looks now out window, and breath keeps on breathing, hearts pulled in, a sudden deep sad longing to want to stay, be another person someday when I grow up. The world somehow forever that way, and its lovely, royally shifting shores sounding now in my ears. My ears? Well, what's on my head as two skin appendages comes with the package. I don't want to argue the point. Tomorrow it changes, gone, abstract, new places, moving on. Is this some old-time weird Odysseus trip, sans paddle up the endless creek? Thinking of you, baby, thinking of all the things I'd like to say and do. Old-fashioned time it takes to be anywhere at all, moving on. Mr. Ocean, Mr. Skies, got the biggest blue eyes in creation. Here comes the sun. While we can, let's do it. Let's have fun.